Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Play Economy, part of Blockworks. I'm super excited today to have David Zastrow on. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, David Zastrow, you got it right.
Okay, David Zastrow. We actually met, I was thinking about it. We met in line for an event at NFT NYC, not this past one a few weeks ago, but in 2021. But anyways, David and I met again. I was hosting the moderating, or not moderating. I was emceeing rather the gaming track at NFT NYC, and David was one of the speakers. And I just loved your insights, that you have a strong opinion about some of the games and the Web3 gaming ecosystem overall. We talked a lot about tokenomics. Do you need them or not? So for all of the Blockworks listeners out there and everyone else, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us kind of how you got here. How'd you get into this stuff?
Sure. Well, thank you first for having me, and really appreciate the invite. For myself, I've been in NFTs and crypto now for about a year and a half. Jumped really quickly into the Axie Infinity space. Started making content and streaming on Twitch, then to making YouTube videos, and kind of gained my popularity from that side. Obviously, there's a lot of up and downs that came with Axie Infinity, and a lot of highs, and then some recent lows. But definitely a lot of learnings came out of it. And so for me, I have a kind of finance background from education side, but then I have like kind of a retail merchandising community background from my IRL job in the last 10 years. And so kind of all that tied together is what helped give me a good perspective on what I thought would become successful through the gaming space. And so through a lot of those lessons I learned through Axie, I think there was a lot of missed opportunities and mistakes made, but I think that made me a better investor and better kind of person to kind of be eyeing all the different projects that are coming out right now and having a strong opinion or perspective on them.
Yeah. And so a little bit about, I want to get into some of your theories because I think that, again, you do have such a great, I think, opinion and lens on these things. But also when you were younger, were you a gamer? Were there any like particular games that you loved playing or style of games?
Oh yeah, for sure. My first system was a Sega Genesis 3. So I jumped into Sonic really early on. That was my favorite game back then. Quickly then grew into like Pokemon was probably the most iconic game that I played throughout my entire life. And then kind of just grew into all facets of games, from shooters to MMOs to RPGs. And then eventually, as I got older in life too, you can kind of see behind me is just a ton of board games. And so like high strategy focused board games. So also kind of some community games there too. But I always like to kind of play on that game theory and figuring out best ways to strategize and come out on top.
Yeah. Well, I definitely can relate with Pokemon. I was obsessed with anime when I was a kid, and I still am actually today. It's funny, I had some friends over and they're like, you really just watch this for like hours and hours. And I love it. I don't know. There's something wrong with me. But so I guess like, Axie Infinity then is I feel like it's such a kind of, it lends so much from the Pokemon theory and ecosystem. So, talk me through that experience of discovering, I guess Axie really being kind of like one of your gateways into like what could be Web3 gaming. But what are some of those kind of theories and learnings that you had from going through that experience and covering it so closely?
Well, if we went through all that, that would easily take the 45 minutes today.
High level.
But we'll try to jump through them pretty quickly. Yeah, I think the similarity to Pokemon really wasn't actually what I was drawing towards. It was more the Hearthstone model, where it was just kind of this like card-based game with characters that you could then kind of battle against one opponent. And the uniqueness was you could own the assets. And so for me, coming from a gaming environment and like one of the more popular games, obviously with Fortnite, and not being able to own the skins you're purchasing, you're kind of leasing them for the longevity of the game as long as you keep that account. I love the idea and I understood it very quickly, and something that I wanted more of. And so I saw that as a huge advantage within Axie initially. And you started to see, as I got in, it slowly picked up more and more volume. When I got in, there was less than 30,000 players, and they peaked last year at 2.7 million. And so, there's a massive growth in there too, but there's a lot of things that were challenging in there, like community-driven scholarship models, where you were able to loan your Axies out to people and take a share of the token that they were generating. And so you have kind of just hyperinflation of players to hyperinflation of Axies and the SLP token. That's great as you're growing, but as soon as that growth stalls, there's challenges there too. And then if you look at the Axie space as well, they had V2 and they were working on launching V3. So it really wasn't the ideal time to grow, 10x from where they were, or even 100x, almost 100x. And so for them, there was a bunch of challenges that kind of came alongside that too, and then different expectations and kind of the communication from their core team kind of pivoted from this kind of supporting nations and supporting third world nations into helping them live a better life through the digital economy, to then, oh hey, we're more of a collector's game where we just want you to kind of be competitive and battle, and more enjoy the experience and own the asset still, but not so much from a financial responsibility or always go up mentality.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a compelling narrative, right? And it still is really interesting, because the problem is, like, how can you use technology to create more economic opportunities for people? I think that is still a very compelling positioning. It's just executing on that, right? There's a lot of pressure, and especially in an industry that is so new, like Web3 gaming. And, again, as I alluded to before, kind of like sustainable tokenomics, or just throwing out tokenomics, right? How does that even work? How can you sustainably reward an ecosystem? But that does kind of lead me into one of the first games we want to talk about, which is Crypto Unicorns, which actually I knew nothing about before talking to you. But you have some interesting insights, and I'm just going to pull up a little bit so everyone who is listening can see what I'm referring to.
Sure. So while you pull it up, so right now they're under maintenance, so we were going to show you the game today. But the studio Laguna Games, why I want to talk about them today, and one thing I really loved in their focus is they've had a pure focus on the community since the beginning. And so they're definitely launched early, and they're in kind of this MVP model right now, where it's basically a Farmville game. Where you own your land and you're able to farm different resources that can then upgrade your land or upgrade your buildings, breed more unicorns, and you're just kind of growing the user base right now. Over time, they're going to add on other layers of games, from jousting to racing to kind of this RPG battler, where you can use your unicorns to battle other players. And so obviously right now there kind of was high expectations even for an MVP, and people are always in the NFT space thinking, how do I 2x, how do I flip? And so they had a lot of that happen too there, as prices were up a lot from their mint prices. However, obviously, as a kind of an MVP and Farmville style game, people maybe aren't spending a ton of time there yet. What the team has continued to do is give out more governance tokens. They've rewarded with, I got a silly badge that just says I survived the launch of Crypto Unicorns, and all I got was this lousy badge, and it's on like a t-shirt on an NFT. Obviously, that's really worth nothing in value, but it also is worth everything to me as a person that was there testing it. And so I think we're going to see a lot more games and communities start to kind of have this badge type system, or just other ways to show to the rest of the world, and kind of prove to your peers that you were there in early stages, or through alpha, or through glitches, or in high victories and high moments where, we did grow 100x in players, or we bred the millionth Axie or something like that. And so I think that's where Unicorns is getting a lot of things right. There's always going to be pushback from a community if the price is going down to panic and freak out and want to fix it. However, what they've done better than any other game I've seen thus far is continually reward, where, again, I've been able to claim some type of reward from the game almost every week for the last like 12 weeks. And so no other game is doing that right now, that I've ever experienced. And the biggest part they're giving away is the governance tokens, which is also already a part of a DAO, and you can already have votes and proposals submitted in there too. So they're already starting to decentralize early on, and they're allowing it for people that are just active in the ecosystem, holding assets and playing them, to kind of get this exposure, which to me, I really love.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that that I was there first, because I feel that clout kind of goes so hand in hand with NFTs and kind of like this digital flexing or virtual flexing, if you will. So what you're kind of mentioning is almost like I guess like a POAP, but like instead of like at a physical event, you're kind of like here first, interacting with the game and part of the ecosystem, which is super interesting. Okay, cool. Well, the gameplay is really awesome. I know, wish I could show everyone, because I thought it was neat and it was engaging. And while I pull up the next game that we want to talk about, which is going to be Ember Sword, explain a little bit about what you find interesting about Ember Sword, and what they've done.
Yeah, so from an Ember Sword standpoint, what they've done really well is they've created this system that hasn't launched yet, so it's still kind of like they're not released yet, but the way they released their land to me is a really interesting dynamic, and we don't have all of the knowledge as to how it's actually going to work. But The base layer understanding is by owning the land, you're going to be getting the real revenue back from whatever transactions and findings are happening on those
Yeah.
land plots. And so if you own, it's the way they initially crafted it is that it's going to be a radius system. So if some person is farming the trees on your plots, or they found gold perhaps on your plot, if they were to then trade that in, or if they found a unique NFT item and they wanted to sell it, you would get a portion of that revenue back just based on owning lands in that area. And so for me, a lot of these games, as you're doing, and you just see it pop up now, a lot of these games that you're seeing come up right now is that if you have land, they're trying to focus on, if you are a landowner, you have to then also be a player, which is, you probably want them to be a player, sure. However, most of the people that have time to play 3 to 4 hours of video games probably don't have tens of thousands of dollars to dump into NFTs. It's just,
Yeah.
you usually don't have that dynamic where you have tons of money and you have tons of time to just video game and degen and do whatever you want. And so to think that they're going to have that time to play is probably unrealistic, but you need sometimes that revenue, the income initially as a game studio, to be able to develop your game. And so you're kind of treating them more as a seed round investor. And so for me, I love that model where you're kind of rewarding them as the person that owns the land that allows them to kind of get some revenue share from the actual game, without having to do anything necessarily too time consuming or like rent out and find scholars. It makes it very clean. And I think that's a key part as we talk about some of the games here today, or flaws or positives, is that the easier they can make it for the person that actually owns the asset, in my opinion, is going to be the better for the game going forward. And ideally, like, your goal is, whenever you're selling something, I'm trying to encourage all the games that I'm consulting or advising with, is just really asking them why. Like, why does someone actually want to own that land? Is it just purely a flex to say, hey, I own this 1 square of land in Ember Sword? Or is there actually going to be some value back on that? And that could even be an in-game thing too, where, hey, if you own land, you can find more rare items, or you can harvest more resources. And there is other challenges there too. It doesn't have to just be like a monetary, hey, you get a share of our revenue back. But they really always need to be answering that why. And I think Ember Sword is positioned that, with the way they've launched land thus far, provided it comes to fruition and the game launches I think that land proposal is really exciting, and I'd hope to see that more games implement a very similar system.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to hear your thoughts actually on land sales, because this is something that I feel like, I'm like, oh God, not another metaverse, not another land sale, not another NFT marketplace. Like, I feel like sometimes I hear so much of this. And like, what's your personal opinion on like the land sale craze, especially as an early seed? Because I was talking about it with, I did a lunch during NFT NYC, and John Linden from Mythical Games. This was kind of one of the topics that came up. And he was like, well, it's really impossible if you want to onboard millions and millions of people. If you have kind of like, finite resources of something, it's much, much more challenging to then, to get more people into the game. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, if that is a sustainable way of doing things, or if you're like in only certain use cases.
Yeah, no, I think only certain use cases is probably the right way to describe it. And again, it's really, what's the benefit of owning said land? And what
Yes.
can you do with it? And so for a lot of the games that are coming out, they're using it, in my opinion, just as a way to sell some land. And you're seeing some games, and Unicorns is actually perhaps a bad example for this, because I think that they're taking that unique approach where they want everyone to be able to own land. They've capped their land at 1 million pieces. And so that's a
Yeah.
lot of pieces in the current dynamic, where there might only be about 1 million people that own land. Only about 30,000 is currently in the market. But that
Yeah.
still is a lot of land, even when there's 100 million players, to still think there'd be 1 million plots that want to be owned within the ecosystem. And so from that part, as you're producing your land, it really is kind of asking that question: what are you trying to accomplish with someone owning land? And so for them, obviously, they kind of have this Farmville mentality, where that the land is kind of the key base that allows you to breed, craft new items, upgrade parts, potentially allow your characters to become stronger in the game. And so when you have that high of a supply, hopefully you're not talking about a $10,000 price tag on land. Or if you're
Yes.
trying to restrict, it really has to be that benefit of, well, then why are you going to have other people come to your ecosystem? Like, it's almost like if you looked at a Fortnite, imagine if you were one of the seed kind of investors investing into the land of Fortnite. There's millions of people that can come play the game. They can do everything for free. They don't need to own land, but perhaps you get royalties based off of ad revenue that's being then sold on the land plots that you own. Like, there's a lot of other layers you can put on there too, to kind of make land a more attractive purchase for retail investors or investors in general.
Yeah.
And again, it's just kind of figuring out the whole why and how is it going to potentially have more value in the future beyond just like, oh, it's a collectible asset and I'm one of the few people that can say I own this land. Because I think while you can easily do art, you could do PFPs in some regards to like have it be collectible or artistic and kind of flex that. It's very hard to say, hey, I have this small JPEG on this map and it's a little square, but it's 92 by minus 120 and that's mine. It's like,
That's mine. I own that.
yeah,
Comes to
you're
me.
probably not impressing a lot of people with just kind of that that flex of you owning
Yeah.
it. And so to me, it's a very hard dynamic there to level out. And so it's really just kind of figuring out why do you need to own land and what's really the benefit behind it. And so the only caveat I'll say in all this too is if you're a game studio listening to this, just be careful if it becomes kind of that security mentality. Like the Ember Sword is kind of in that gray area. Like, is that technically a security if you're expecting a revenue split from the game? And so there are some other challenges there that we don't know or haven't had clarified yet. However, I see that still becoming one of the most beneficial models going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny you mentioned that because I feel like I've become a pseudo expert on the Howie test. I'm just like, but is this security? Like maybe, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's so uncertain. But you know, most of the people that I talk to, right, they want it as an investment, and it's kind of like at the end of the day, these games just need to be fun as a core layer. Otherwise, no one is even going to come. So it's like the people that come in and they put all the money and they're like, oh, it's going to be great. It's like not necessarily. You got to make sure that these people know how to build an effing video game or a game that is just interesting to play or sticky.
Right.
Say. So that leads me to the next game that we're going to talk about. Which is Big Time, which is more on a cosmetic lens. So I would love to hear your insight into Big Time as well.
Yeah, so Big Time has so basically how I've talked about in games is I personally would like, and part of the things I talked about in my NFT NYC presentation was the challenge of owning everything. And so I think that like one thing I mentioned there too is that right now, even on the console side, like PlayStation, Xbox, or Switch, if you do a digital download, they're basically locked to your account. You can't go sell it to your buddy down the road or let them borrow the game for a week and you can't play it, even though it's digital. And so I could see a world where those are all going to become an NFT that you'll spend the $60 on, but then you could sell it for $40 once you're done with the game. Maybe the producer of say Mario will still want to sell them for $60 at retail, but you could buy a used one for $40. And maybe there's something to do with the save mechanics. I don't know. Either way, I see that you could the vision of owning everything. But a key layer of that is, can you own the leveling up? And so Big Time has taken this approach where they're like, we do not want you to be able to sell your characters or have it be a pay to win model. And so the model they've adapted to is kind of the Fortnite skins are only meant, or the NFTs are meant to only be skins, and they're meant to be kind of that digital flex, and you can find them through dungeons and playing at higher levels. So there's an incentive to level up. However, then you're just basically having these skins that is kind of this flex to your peers, and you're selling only to these other people with no actual benefit. The difference there, though, is that in Fortnite, if I'm coming in for the very first time playing the game, or if I've been playing for 300 hours, the only thing difference is skill level. My character is not stronger. In Big Time, that is not the case. Your character is going to level up, and your high level character actually will be stronger. So your proof of work is actually a lot greater. And so now you have proof of work and leveling, and the ability that I think you should be able to sell the characters in that model. So if you want to go play and you have the time to play, say 300 hours on a character, level up to max level with the best gear that's actually is improving your character, you should be able to potentially sell that. And whereas Big Time is taking the approach, hey, we don't want that. We just want it to be, you have to grind up your character, but we can sell the skins. And so it'll be an interesting watch to see, because I think that some of the people that already tested the game, they've talked about how it's fun. It's kind of this fun group dungeon raid battler. And so I think there is potential still in the game, but it's an interesting kind of stance to stand on, that like, hey, we're not allowing you to sell and like pay to be better. You have to only be buying the gear. And so you can pivot that too. Like, should you be able to sell the gear separately so that they can just have better gear without maybe leveling up their character? Should it be all or nothing? You can sell like your whole account as an NFT that has all the gear, the character level and everything. But once you sell it, that account's kind of gone. And then, you have to start a whole new one as that person. So there's other questions to be asked and looked at from all game studios. But for Big Time, I thought it was really interesting to talk about how they were just decided that it was only going to be cosmetics that were the NFTs. And it was the only thing that really was sellable throughout the game.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned this about selling the accounts, because that's kind of what happens today in like a gray market sense, right? Is that people are, they will level up and then folks can buy them. So it would make sense, at least for me, that there would be a more standard marketplace for those things, because there's supply and there's demand. And it's funny. I when I first got into NFTs in early 2018, William Quigley from Worldwide Asset Exchange was one of the few people that was really talking about this at the time. And his background, he had one of his companies was, what they would do is kind of facilitate this gray market of kind of selling assets and skins from games. So he knew this like very, very well, is that there was this demand there. So it's kind of interesting to see. But I'd love for you too to pull up Illuvium, because we're very excited. I was excited to see some of the alpha tests that Dave did. People trust Dave to play their games. So definitely is a very knowledgeable person on games and testing them out and giving feedback. So that's why we're excited to have you, because you're just uber qualified to kind of talk about.
Appreciate it. So I have it pulled up. I don't know if you're able to then share it. There you go. So basically, Illuvium's going to have kind of 3 tiers of what their game is being built. So this is the auto battler, which we can see. There's going to be a kind of land gaming, kind of like almost like a farming, mining game system. And there's going to be an open world kind of RPG running around portion of the game. So this is all that is able to be tested right now in a private beta test. And so their whole vision as to what they're trying to do, and you can kind of see here some of the graphics. They're really high quality graphics. And what it is, it's an auto battler system where you have a certain amount of currency, you can have a certain amount of alluvials, and you can kind of go and battle to try to combat the different computers or NPCs that pop up each round. And so we'll just do a quick round here. I'll just throw a couple characters in. This is not necessarily the proper build to be doing. And this one does not have a timer. So this is kind of more of a casual build where you can test out and learn the characters versus a competitive one where you have 60 seconds in between rounds. And every second you take counts like a penalty of time as you're competing against other people on a leaderboard. And so you can see it's kind of cool. You can zoom all the way in to experience what's going on, and you have your character there too. And the graphics are really, really beautiful. And so I think that the impressive thing from Illuvium and what they had created here was they showed that they could do high quality graphics in kind of an NFT game. And I'll just press play to move on to the next one to see what happens. But they could prove that they could actually do high quality graphics from a kind of a newer dev studio.
Is that the most you can zoom in? I want to see them
already building. Yeah, there is a way I think you can move. Yeah, so you can move around too, and like WASD. And
I mean, that's, as someone that used to play anime RPG games, and essentially you'd obviously pick your moves and then they would kind of like go and attack. And I love that you can kind of get a 360 view of everything and some of the details of the characters. This is awesome.
Yeah, and so I think that, sorry, I just kind of jumped back out. So yeah, so I think that what they've created here and how they've set this all up is really pretty, and I love what they're building on it. So from the Illuvium standpoint, I think they're kind of one of the first games that has really challenged the quality of the visuals to compete against some of the what we call AAA games traditionally. And so the question left on Illuvium from my standpoint, to be transparent on it though, is where do we go from here? And so I still really like that. I'll stop sharing this one so I can pull up the next thing. I still really like what their visions are potentially for like kind of the RPG side of it. I still don't know about the whole land staking, mining, and every other aspect of that and what Illuvium is building, because it's a pretty complex system that they're designing. And until it's fully baked out, it's hard to say what was good and what was bad. And so I think that all I can take out of it right now, just this game, once it could be kind of open access and allow players to then just have this kind of auto battler mentality, to then compete against peers and prove like how high can you climb the ladder to win. Because one other thing that we didn't mention was like how you move characters in and out. You can't just pick whatever characters you want based on the money you have. You can only ever swap out 2 characters around. And so you can't just change your comp every round to be perfect to counter what the computer is. You have to kind of slowly evolve and roll that comp, and you don't know what the next comp is going to be until you see it. Except for every day it does change. So super interesting. But what I really did like about them is that they're kind of one of the first ones that I've seen that has, really high quality visuals. And like they've pushed to, if you are going to show it in 1080p, 60 frames per second minimum, try to actually do it in 2K or 4K to really just show off the details and beauty of the game. Which I think is something that's really cool because you don't hear many, NFT games been like, hey, we need this in 4K.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely like much more pixelated and simple. We did have, I don't know if you're familiar with Exaverse. We had them on a few weeks ago, but they built also kind of like a beautiful, I believe it's just one-on-one right now. But the graphics and the battle kind of battle scenario are also really interesting. It's more of kind of like open moves based. Pretty challenging, but fun. Because I'm always selfishly, I'm looking for anything that's like Street Fighter, Tekken, like that. That's what I want to do. I want to like just go head to head with a friend or a couple friends and like just smash it out. Just hit.
Well, a little tangential then. I mean, we didn't talk about this before. Have you heard of Crypto Painter?
No, what's Crypto Painter?
Okay, so it's not, that's not like the name of the game or anything like that. He's just he's an artist.
Okay.
He does kind of visual NFTs that are pretty fun, and he does kind of a famous people there too. I mentioned it. I'll see if I can pull up a picture of it real quick. I don't know if I'll be able to find it in time. But he's making a Street Fighter-esque NFT themed video game.
Yes.
And so he said it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years to actually complete. But kind of the brief snippet he's shown, as I think he's done a picture. He might have even done a little bit of video there too. It's beautiful. And so just to see the quality that he was kind of building and putting into it is really amazing. And so I think a lot of that too, as it comes with funding or the visions people have for games, like they're not just going to pop overnight with these great graphics and the great game design. And, I've had some others we can talk about too, but I've had other games that talked about, trying to be, like a Mario Kart-esque game, etc. And it's like Mario Kart's now been around for over 20 years. There has not been a single game that's been able to dethrone them or even like have strong competition to them. And I've quoted as saying like the closest thing that I've seen to it is I found it. Is the closest thing I've seen to it is like a crash racing game. And so no one's really ever dethroned it. And so you can see here, like these graphics are just absolutely insane of a Bored Ape Yacht Club.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Well, that would be. Yeah.
So he's getting to the point where I don't think he's going to have like all of them in the kit, so anyone that owns it can play it. He might be doing that down the road, but ideally just have really high quality visual of the NFT collections to have, say, 16 fighters from 16 different collections to then put into the game with all their unique abilities that tie back to their traits and what they have. It's just almost more Mortal Kombat than even Street Fighter. But
yeah, really cool. Oh my god, I love that. Okay, well, I'm super excited for that, and I think that's also a great way to bring in kind of some of these other communities to these games, because that's one thing that we've kind of noticed, or myself and some of my colleagues, is that getting the word out on some of these games is some of the most challenging. It's one of the most challenging things because Steam obviously has a good network and kind of like discovery, if you will, and it's like ease of use and people have accounts, but there's really not that equivalent, or at least that I've seen yet, that really focuses on Web3 games. So I think that that's going to help unlock, be another step towards mass adoption, is really just having a place where people can find them.
That's a huge thing. And so I know he's controversial. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but it's this guy Kagian, who he's a YouTube streamer. He covers all NFT games. He's controversial at times, and he can be way more hot takeish than I am, and I don't agree with him all the time. However, what I will say for him, the part that I do agree that he brings up quite frequently is how we're building this whole Web3 ecosystem of ownership and partnership and working together. Yet every single game that he's talking to, or almost all the games he's talking to, it's, hey, we'll give you alpha, come play the game and stream it for us. And he's like, all right, so my revenue is just whatever I can farm off ads or from my viewers, and you're just going to profit and grow your user base and make money for me to do kind of the dirty work and grow your game. He's like, that's kind of messed up in this whole world. We're trying to make this Web3 ecosystem. Why are we not supporting the content creators more in a better way to actually have them, kind of grow that? And I have the same thing too, where instead of that side, because I haven't been streaming a ton, although I will be doing it more coming up on YouTube as well, is also like the consulting advising side too, right? So like I have games with like, hey, come check out my game, give me all your feedback. I'm like, well, that's a lot of work, but also you're not going to, if you take my ideas and I'm going to probably give you good advice, now you're going to go make money and profit off all this. And I'm just kind of stuck with an hour and a half conversation where I learned about a cool new game, but I'm not driving
Yeah.
any value for myself off of it, unless I want to go
Yes.
invest. And so I think there's just kind of like that weird thing right now where a lot of people aren't really looking at that kind of creator, maybe Twitter space host to
Yeah.
streamer or advisor mentality, and understanding like even those hour, 2 hour meetings. I've
Yeah.
talked to some peers. I'm like, do we start charging for these? Because I'm doing,
Yeah.
2 or 3 a day, and
Yeah.
I'm giving advice, and like it might lead to me becoming an advisor or something else. But those first 2 hours are still a lot of time that I'm investing to give feedback and share on their game.
Yeah.
So I've thought about that more and more lately.
Yeah. Well, let's fix that. I will, we'll talk offline and try and fix that. Cause that's something that I obsess about. Because there's gotta be a way. Otherwise we're on this like Web3, like reward the creators, and it's kind of just BS. So I really don't want that to happen. Well, I want to talk about the next thing. I want to be mindful of time as well. So let's go into other side. So they had their test. What I hear is that it was pretty impressive. It was, it's built on Improbable or with Improbable, and they've done some exciting things. And I know that you tested it yesterday. And so I'd love for you to pull up a little bit of footage of that, of you kind of exploring. So all of our viewers here who maybe missed that, and also give a little bit more context as well. Other side is, as far as my knowledge extends, they're working with the Bored Ape community or Yuga Labs on their IP and kind of bringing it to life. But maybe there's more alpha that Dave, that I don't even know yet.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have more alpha, and what I'm showing here is just kind of the stream. And so they partner with a company called Improbable IO. And so Improbable, from all that I can gather, basically any game you're playing right now, for the most part, is either built on Unreal Engine 4 or it's built on Unity. And so this game is not built on either. I'm pretty sure, as I dug deeper after playing this yesterday and experiencing it, Improbable IO has their own internal software that they've designed and created. And so they are able to do these massive rooms. And so if you ever played video games before, Fortnite going to 100 characters on a battle royale was like crazy. And you've seen a couple other games do big rooms like 124 on a death match or something like that. But this room here, there was a small box, almost like a Fortnite lobby in size, and there was 2,500 people at peak in this demo. And so all of them were able to move around. And then the coolest thing for me was they had spatial audio, including microphones and communication. And so as you ran around, once everyone started talking, as you moved away from them, their voice would become more faint. And as you moved towards someone new, would slowly pick up their voice to become louder. And then as you ran past them, it would go quiet again. And then based on the angle in which you were looking at the screen, if you have surround sound headphones, it would also then have the spatial awareness too, to, oh, they're behind you now, or, oh, they're right in front of you. And you would hear it in your headphones in that way. And so all of that combined with 2,500 people in a room at one time, it was just very weird and very cool for, someone who's been in gaming for a long time and just playing games. And so it's really interesting. We'll see how it kind of plays out over the next month or so. But this was just a stress test where they wanted to test, I think, a bunch of people coming online at one time, make sure heavy emotes, heavy texting, heavy voice chat was not going to break their servers or break what they were doing. And so there's another stress test, I believe, on the 9th or the 10th. And then the official first trip is going to be on July 16th. And so if you have an other side land plot, you can come and take the first trip, which will be, they've said, the first time to gather, explore your resources and land plots, and kind of learn more about the ecosystem. And so really excited for July 16th. I think that will be a pivotal moment into what is being built by Yuga and Improbable with the other side. And if you go to their website, I strongly encourage, go to otherside.xyz, and there's a place there called the obelisk up top. And I would just go in there and read. And so it starts on the first trip, and it tells you there too that the first trip is also going to be kind of like a moment where they're going to POAP you, or they're going to give you a benefit for being a part of that first trip journey. So they're trying to encourage anyone and everyone that owns plots to come be a part of this first trip, because they're going to commemorate it somehow.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so there's 100,000 plots right now, which obviously seems like a lot, but the whole system is going to be interoperable, allow for anyone that has a project to come in. So if you've already seen like the 7 or 8 plots that are actually going to be or plots NFT projects that are going to be in the game at launch, but there's also going to be, they're going to allow for other projects, like new ones, like it might be Moonbirds, a popular project that if the Moonbirds team wants to partner with Improbable to design their characters, you can now run around Improbable as your Moonbird. And so there's a lot of stuff like that I think isn't quite being talked about right now. And then kind of what happens with the land from there. As you read more, it sounds like they're going to create it kind of they call it a meta RPG, but the goal of trying to have other people build and want to build in their ecosystem. And so I think their goal was like, and it's going to be a little bit too far-fetched, but how I'm kind of gathering it and making the assumption in my own mind is they're going to turn the other side into essentially like Unreal Engine 4 or like Epic Games did with their core dynamic. And they're just going to say, okay, here's all the tech, here's all the cool things we can do with over 10,000 people on a server at one time, spatial audio, voice chat communication, and now go create what you want to create. And so then a part of other side, if you own land, something else, if you want, just like a theory there too, all the other side plots seem to have a little door in them. And so there's two, right? There's going to be another 100,000 plots. Is that literally the other side of your plot? Is it going to be like you portal into it and then you have to like, you can build on that plot versus like the other side is all designed to whatever the Yuga universe is meant to be? And so that's kind of that question there too. And my theory is that if you own a plot, you can build whatever experience in a certain amount of space that you want, either based on the tier of your land or whatever. Maybe you can combine lands too, because I mentioned there about linking lands, and perhaps you need a certain amount of land plots to go build like a Fortnite battle royale, or to go build a racing game, or build whatever, a mini golf simulator. Like you could do whatever you want within the ecosystem, but I think their goal is to give you all the tech and ability to go build with the SDK, and then it's up to the community and the other people to build it. And then hopefully they've empowered enough communities to want to be in there because it's cool and it's fun, that the games can kind of come off of it in the next couple of years.
Wow. I mean, I'm blown away by this personally. And I'm not usually a fangirl in particular with this project specifically, but what you just told me is really interesting, because what it solves for in my mind is like, a metaverse is really interesting, or a meta world is if you have user generated content, right? Like kind of like obviously Roblox, where you can build mini games. But one of the problems with this, especially in like more adult centered games, is that things can get dark pretty quickly, right? Like we are human beings, and like that's just part of our nature. But I think having it where you kind of are part of a community already, and the community in and of itself, like you want to be true to it. You have like some loyalty. You literally have skin in the game. Like it doesn't behoove you to like create a bunch of BS that's going to actually hurt it, because you're then hurting yourself. Then that might be an interesting incentive mechanism to build high value things versus things that are like trolly or hurtful or whatnot. So what do you think? Is other side doing it well? Like, sounds like it, but I'm curious.
Well, I think the first trip will be the biggest deciding factor for everybody. And if that goes really well, then I think we'll start to see people want to build in there and grow off of it. But that's got to be not 100%, but it has to be intriguing enough. And for me, I played Fortnite a lot, especially when it first came out with friends. And, I talked about in my speech before too, is that Fortnite for me was fun at the beginning. Eventually it didn't become fun, but the fun factor was playing with your friends and having a goal, but all the other things you could do in Fortnite that made the game a fun experience. And so I think that's how the other side, what I experienced yesterday, to be able to have like the spatial voice chat in there too. So I imagine if you had like hot mics with your friends, and it wasn't just you're all pinging into the same thing consistently, but you can actually know where they are. And instead of having to say, hey, I'm north and people are north of me, you can kind of hear where they are if it's like faint and stuff like that. I think all that's super cool. And so that, plus also one of the cool things was with the emote side, like and it's small details, but with the emotes, if people were spamming a lot of the same emote, they would kind of become like balloons and fireworks, and like you'd have these other unique sounds there too that just made it feel a little bit more of like that wow factor. Like that, I call it the Disney effect. Like it's just kind of thing where you're just sitting there. It's like, it's not that crazy, but it just makes you sit there, enjoy, and like wow for whatever they're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've been mulling over this because I think that this is kind of a really important concept about gaming, is that oftentimes like we come for the game, but we stay for the community. And I think that that's going to be true kind of for this as well. It's like, it's really the glue for friends, right? We make friends playing games online. And so initially it's the game, but then we've got this nice community. And so, we play games for years. I want to be mindful of time because we've only got a few minutes left. So we're going to go in the kind of, not negative, but we'll kind of just like maybe talk about a cautionary tale. You and I touched base a little bit yesterday, and we talked about how some of these communities, like Axie and Doodles, I believe as well, kind of came out of the CryptoKitties experiment. That's kind of that's where I came in, hearing about that and being like, okay, this really, led my interest. But we're going to talk about a game that is kind of a cautionary tale on Peg Axie. So talk to us a little bit about Peg Axie.
Yeah, so Pegaxi was actually something too where their growth lead, this guy Corey, was super upfront about everything. It's like, hey, these prices are kind of crazy. I would maybe sell something. Like, please don't be buying at these prices. It's just like we don't have a burn mechanic right now. So he was cautionary tale, which was really nice to see and refreshing from someone that's like on the growth side of the game. And so they're kind of the same thing where they launched an MVP. Their horses, you could not control them in racing. It was just kind of random RNG, whether you won races or not. And so they're just basically, you push button, you earn tokens at like a 25% chance. And so there really just wasn't a whole lot around it. And so I think that the cautionary tale there might be like, they didn't earn money from that. Like I said, they probably earned a little bit from the transaction volume on their marketplace. I'm not sure on their split to treasury versus to team. And that's something I should probably check up on. However, assuming that he made a little bit from that, the cautionary tale should have been go and raise the money, establish how you're going to have that sustainable game with burn mechanisms and kind of community growth, and then go and actually launch your MVP and at least have some kind of more forward-looking time frame of what's going to happen versus just, we're hoping that we'll be able to fix it or try to like theory craft and solve on the fly. Because ultimately, if you're planning for the million people that you have in the game right now and then half them leave, does your plan still work? Do you still need them to be buying or breeding or doing other things? And so we saw a massive uptake and a massive decline in players and breeding and everything else from that game. And so I think for them, they just need to get that dynamic where you actually are racing your horse. Again, kind of that Mario Kart style, where you can control and have some impact on the outcome versus just RNG or whatever their stats are. And I think that will be the biggest changer for them to kind of become a real game versus what they are right now, just kind of like a push button MVP.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's interesting to note because, like, that's something that I personally kind of go back and forth on is like, is it, do you test something out first and see how people react to the game and then, but, your point is well taken, right? Is like having like at least a foundation for a roadmap of like, hey, we hope to go here. And then if you have to pivot along the way, well, you can kind of make those judgment calls. So, okay, Peg Axie, are they still alive? Like, are they still?
They are still alive. Yes, they just I still have one of the founding Pegas, which is like one of the original OG kind of Pegas. And they just got airdropped. They're getting airdropped something. And so I don't play the game. My friends still do. So I loan my horses to them. And he's like, hey, send me the horse. We're going to unlock this thing and we can do whatever we want with it. I was like, all right, like, sure. You're running it right now. Like, have fun. And so he kept me updated, but they are still building again. Like, I think they have enough money. They have enough funding. So I don't know if that all came more from transaction volume in that mini boom they had, or if that was just funding they already had there too. And this is, again, that change of, shouldn't you be funding more from the community out the gate with maybe their founding Pegas and then like just delay the game, because there is always going to be hype going into a game. But if the game launches and it's not really a game or it launches poorly, that hype's going to draw down. And then how much of your community do you actually lose versus saying, hey, we're going to delay another 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And so having that is obviously a fundamental challenge there too, in whatever you're building within the space right now.
Okay. Well, I think we got to wrap up here. One game we did want all of our viewers to check out was easy.io. I don't know if you have time to pull it up, Dave.
Yeah, I can real quick.
Okay, really quick. Because what I thought was really interesting, so I'll give a little bit of context behind it as well. It's on Fractal. It is the quickest way to get into it's a first-person shooter game. But there are, I believe, 8 other players, or does it kind of change every time?
It's usually 8 on Team Deathmatch, yeah.
Yes. So super fast. I mean, are all of these live players or some computer generated?
So they will put bots in there too, but I don't know how many. I can try to look on there. It looks like maybe 2 of these are not live players right now.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's just like you just click the screen, as you saw when I first came in. You just click to play. You're already in the game. I don't want to be banging my keyboard right now and trying to shoot people, but
Yeah.
ultimately though, and so what they did was really smart is they basically create a system that if you buy the items or the skins like for your character or for the guns, you earn their EV token, and that EV token then can be sold for Solana. And so that all comes from either their transaction volume or through ad revenue. So you can see down there's like a spot for advertisements that'll be in the game. And so they're going to be selling those advertisement slots and then taking that revenue and giving it back to the community. So it's the simplest, most straightforward way to kind of have this kind of play to earn game without really any false expectations. It's just play the game. As long as you own skins, you earn the token, then you can trade that whenever you want in for Solana. They just opened that too, so you can see I don't have a ton, but I can trade for Solana. It's probably like $1 maybe. But yeah, it's just kind of this unique new way, I think, of having a very easy to integrate, quick to join game that can put you right in the action, and you can have friends join, and it's really smooth. It's just, for me, it's like a very dumbed down Halo.
Yes.
And that maybe is giving it too much credit, but at the same time, it works, and it works pretty well for
I
what
love
it is.
it.
And again,
Well,
it's in the
check out
browser too, so it's like super minimal on your computer. Like you can play on a laptop, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think a use case and mass adoption. Well, Dave, thank you so much. Like I've enjoyed so much our conversation. I've learned so much about so many Web3 games. I hope everyone listening has as well. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all as Disaster_ETH. And yeah, just feel free to interact. I check my DMs, try to check them every day. But if I'm slow to respond, just ping me again, and I'll try to help answer your questions or help out. Appreciate the
He's a
time.
wealth of knowledge. Yes. So thank you so much for being on the show. That was another episode of Play Economy. Everyone excited that you're here. We will see you next week. I believe we're having My Pet Hooligan on. So if you're a My Pet Hooli holder or you're interested in seeing the gameplay, we will be doing that next week. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.